What's up, y'all? In this video we're going to go over brackets for mounting locks to doors or electric strikes to frames. There are a number of situations as a locksmith you may run up on where you are asked to put on some type of lock, and there's no good factory method that's already built into the door for installing the body of the lock, and that's where these specialty brackets come into play. Major being one of the major players in the specialty bracket category. However, HES and Adams Rite both have their own, typically for like electric strikes and stuff like that. But Major makes a pretty good variety of different styles of brackets. So we're going to go over those mostly, and we are also going to use the whiteboard for that. And we're also going to talk about the brackets that should be used in certain situations and should not be used for other situations. I've got a number of them here that I think you should probably have with you as a just-in-case situation if you get called out and you need to install and you have a particularly difficult installation. These brackets make it much easier to deal with. So let's get started with most of the major brackets that you're going to either A, run across, or B, might need to have with you, and the correct way to use them. Okay, y'all, we've got all the major brackets that are listed on the website for Major Manufacturing. However, you definitely do not need all of them. You don't need to keep all of them in stock. This is a list of all of them, and the red dots signify the ones that show up on the Flanner website. That doesn't necessarily mean you still need them just because they show up, but there are some that are just kind of oddball ones here, and we're going to go over those pretty quickly. Over here I'm going to put the picture from the website up so you can see. I do carry three or four different ones of the Major brand, and I'm starting off with the LMB 01. Now, I have seen a video out there on the uses of this LMB01, and I do want to go ahead and point out right here and now that this is only for the latch. This is not for the strike plate. Some people allude to the fact that you were supposed to cut out the frame and install this and then put the strike plate over it. That is utterly ridiculous. I would actually slap somebody if I saw them doing that. Not really, but you should be slapped if you do that. I've had a number of people ask me whenever I'm using a squeeze plate, which I've done plenty of videos on, if there's a way to squeeze play out the frame, and there's not. There's no way to do that. I'll go ahead and say that again now. But this is not the way. You don't do this. This is literally just for the latch, and it even says that on the description of the Major website. However, I still would not do this if you do not have a squeeze play or a pit bull, whichever one. That's the same thing, two different brands. Then you would really just be best staying off with a drive-in bolt. My preferred drive-in bolts, the Lori brand latches, and you can use a Ilco Lori Deadbolt with any number of mortise cylinders to achieve the best result for installing a lock on a metal door. And yes, you can use a cup strike for the frame. I have tried that in the past instead of just drilling a round hole, but cup strikes always get loose. They're always problematic. They always cause problems in the long run, so I've just discontinued that. Drill my 1-inch hole in the frame. If there's enough gap in the door, I'll surface mount a strike plate and either pop rivet it or tap and drill and put it over the 1-inch hole. But most of the time the door may be too tight to do that, so you really can't, get away with that for the most part. Drill your 1-inch hole, smooth it out with a burr to make sure there's no sharp things poking out, and go about your day, because the metal frame is going to provide enough support for the bolt to go into. You don't really need a strike plate, and you certainly don't need to be cutting out the frame just to install this, just to put a plate back in its spot. Here I've dotted the ones that are on the banner website. I'm going to go ahead and underline the ones that I'm showing you and the ones that I think you should have with you pretty much at all times. Even though I don't like these, it's good to have them, and I will tell you why. But we'll get started with the LMB01 tubular latch plate, not strike plate, for hollow metal doors. This one is for center seam doors. Now with the squeeze plate or the pit bull, when it compresses the door, it can't have the center seam because the center seam is not smooth on the inside of the door. It's actually kind of ridged. So this is like the door right here, and center seam. You've got this center seam, but on the inside, how they form the door, it's got kind of a projection, and when you try to squeeze that, it can like do a really bad crumple. So if you've got a center seam in the door, you definitely don't want to try to use the squeeze plate or the pit bull. And in some cases, this might be the answer. Center seam doors are also a little problematic with drive-in latches, period. That's why I recommend the Lori, because they have, in my opinion, the best drive-in latch out there. But the LMB01 is designed to fit on the center seam door. The LMB11, you notice it skips from 1 to 11. This is the same thing, except it's got a flat surface all the way across. Showing you the picture here. You can't use the 11 on a center seam door because it would have the same problem, whereas that would be pressing in to that folded in seam. So in my case, I feel like if you're going to keep one of these, just in case, that you always just keep the 01. There's no need, in my opinion, to get the 11 or the 10, which is really for wood doors, a wood door reinforcement. I've personally never even ordered or seen one of those, so I don't know. It may be a valid option for some wood doors, but I've never needed it, and I've been doing this a while, so I don't think I need it now. So I don't think you need it personally, and it's not even stocked, so who needs it? But yeah, if you're going to have one of these, go with the 01 because it can be used for center seam or non-center seam. Best way to do it, in my opinion. I will say that the only time I would run across those, come on back here and let's look at a metal door. Dumble door. I don't want to drag them out, so we're just going to come to the back right here. But as you can see, it has this built in from the factory. They have this. The only reason I would ever use one of these, I would not, absolutely would not do this, because most doors are always going to have this cut out for the doorknob or the lever, and you're going to be coming along and adding a deadbolt, which we're going to do one day here. However, the only reason I would ever use one of these is if this was busted out or rusted out, busted or rusted, either one, and it was literally breaking off and falling in. And that's exactly where I would put this into play. I would take this, drill our holes. It comes with rivets. We've done a pop rivet video. I'll post the link up here as well. But this is literally the only situation that I would use an LMB01 in. If I got to a job and these were all rusted out, there was no way for me to pop rivet, not just the screw rusted out, but literally if the tab was broken or rusted out, then you can come in and attach this. And basically what you do is you just put it up here like this, just like that, and then mark your holes, drill your holes, pop rivet it in with a slide rivet, and then use your 832 screws for that. That's the only situation I'd ever use this, y'all. Okay, the LMB02. This is also a pretty rare situation. Literally the LMB02 and the LMB12 is kind of the same thing as the 0111, and it's just half of it. Obviously, if you're putting a mortise lock on the door, that's not going to work. So it's literally this cut off. In fact, you could actually just have these and then cut this to make the same thing. Now these are 832. Mortise locks always use 1224 or 1024, so it does have a bigger threaded here, but again, you could always rethread that. In the worst case scenario, if for some reason you had a mortise lock situation to put on a metal door, you could take an LMB01, cut it right there, retap it for the bigger screw, and there you go. You have your LMB02. That's why I don't carry one. I could always make one. You could actually just cut here and here, and there you have your LMB02. No point carrying it when you already kind of have one, right? Also, it's pretty rare to fresh install a mortise lock on a metal door, so kind of a rare situation need right there. wouldn't recommend stocking it. LMB 12, no center seam. That's the same thing. Just get this one so you can use it either or. Let me mention real quick that these do actually also come with these little paper templates that you can use, but who needs that? You can just eyeball it, right? Paper template. Okay, we're going to move on to the LMB03. That is a universal mounting bracket for hollow metal and aluminum doors. Typically, when you're installing Adams Rite style deadlocks or dead latches, and the LMB03 does have a double side that you can use for two different kind of applications there. They're slightly different on each side. One of them has kind of a deeper, one of them is kind of shallower. It really depends on the door that you're putting them on as to which side is needed. But you see how it has this cutout? That's designed to fit. See right there? Oh, bam, just like that. Oh, actually, bam, just like this. So yeah, you have that right there in the door. You attach it to the metal door. Typically with any brackets, the things that you're going to need: pop rivet gun, you're going to need drill bits, and a countersink. Countersink in the bracket world is a must. A variety of countersinks. There are different versions of the countersink radius. Some of them are sharper, some of them are wider. We're going to look at screws in just a minute, because I do want to point out something about the screws themselves. If you look at the heads of the screws that come with these guys, right, they have I think it's called an undercut, which means instead of it being wider, the head of the screw, if you go to a hardware store and you buy a screw, it's going to have a really deep cut. These actually have a very shallow, and I think it's called undercut, and that's because you're dealing with thin metal. If you tried to countersink one of these fat boys in a metal door, it takes away a lot of the metal. So you want less metal, more countersink, still flush with the metal of the door, and that's where these undercut screws come into play. But obviously this bracket would be for installation if you have to fresh install, or if you have no other way to attach this to a door, especially on wide style doors. We're going to look at the LMB08, which is also it's actually a fairly new, heavily quoted in the lock world, a bracket for mounting to regular narrow style doors. But when you go to wide style doors that have a really deep area, sometimes the LMB08s that we're going to look at in a minute won't work. They won't work at all for wide style. So you definitely need these guys to do this, especially if you're fresh installing a Adams Rite lock on a door. Any number of times doors get sent out by contractors, and guess what? They don't install, they don't pre-cut everything for it, so you have to come along and put it on. And it is dangerous on narrow style to try to drill for the standard screw that comes with it, because you could hit the glass. You don't want to hit the glass. So that's where the LMB 03, 033, and 034, as you can see, 33, you see a pattern here. The 33 is for radius edge doors. You see these a lot on double doors where it's got a radius edge. And then the 34 is for beveled edge doors, which are beveled. And either one of those situations calls for those, but again, I don't ever really need those. So LMB 03, definitely bracket that you would need. All right, LMB 04 and 05. That is 04 is for hollow metal doors for the deadbolts or for the T-strikes. Basically, they're the same bracket, and I've got one over here. It's 04, 05. Typically, when you're installing a lock on a metal door, the difference between them is one of them is for the ANSI, or the bigger strike. That is the 1024 or 1224. I never can remember which one it is. The bigger one has that, and then the 04 has the 832, the standard deadbolt or T-strike latch, either one screw. So typically these are used on frames where you have to install a strike plate, for instance, and you can use it for any number of things. You see, it's got that little with that little bevel, that's because it's got to sit flush and it's got to be sunken in so that it recesses correctly. Same bracket, just a different thread right there. Technically, you could get away with buying the 04 and then tap it for the bigger if you needed to, but you can see the banner only has the 5, but the 4 would be probably the better one to use. You could always pop rivet it. Again, you're going to be needing pop rivets specifically for things like that, so good to have. Also, countersunk head pop rivets, which I talked about in the last pop rivet video. All right, LB 06 and 07. Those are for flush bolts on inactive doors. I don't have those. I do have another one though. Flush bolts that you find on inactive doors, on storefront doors, come with a little plastic guide, goes in the bottom and the top, and that basically guides the rod with the bolt on it. The difference between the two, the 06 has a square hole, right? And then the 07 has a hex hole. The hex hole is far more common, probably the one you're going to need. Here I have Keedex. I forgot to mention Keedex does have a couple of them. It's the K17 Security Bolt and Guide, and it comes with the metal hex one, and basically works the same way as the plastic guide, except it's metal. This one has the hex, so this will be comparable to the 07. Comes with your screws, and it also comes with this metal screw-on guide. This is the end of the guide that goes up into the door and down on the bottom, and this was a lot stronger than your plastic. Yeah, if you're having trouble where people are breaking the bolt, the plastic bolt or the plastic guide, this may be a good answer. However, I have discovered if you put these on a door, every time the door closes, it rattles a little bit. So that's something to take into consideration in a quiet environment. Every time, if somebody uses their inactive door, every time it closes, it's got that rattle to it. And I've had people actually mention that. They're like, yeah, you can hear it. So yeah, pretty easy. The only problem you have with the lower version is, you know, getting your hand in there and getting it in without dropping the door. And I hate dropping doors if you don't have to. Typically you have just enough gap to get your fingers under there and hold it up, and then, you know, mark your holes. What I would do is always use the hole that's there to begin with for the one that was there, and then mark your 2 extra holes. These do provide a lot more security for the inactive door, but it's kind of a specific use situation. Okay, we're going to skip the 08 and go straight to the LMB 15A and D. That is basically a plate where you're switching to a dead latch from a deadlock mechanism that has an indicator. This is kind of a very rare situation. It's actually interesting that Banner has these. It's not really a bracket, more of a cover plate, because it comes aluminum and Duranodic. 15A is aluminum, 15D Duranodic, or the brown color, because you have aluminum and brown doors. It's more of a cover plate to cover up the old indicator deadbolt, which again is pretty rare in my area anyway. You don't see a whole lot of storefront doors that have indicators built on showing locked and unlocked. Maybe it's just an area thing, but I don't see, I've literally never seen one of those inactive use around here. So not really brackets, more of like a cover plate to cover up the holes that were there before. LMB 08, yay! The 08 is, like I said, a fairly new bracket. These guys are actually pretty neat. HKS sent me this tool. I'd never ordered the tool. I'd always ordered the brackets and done it the hard way, but I would recommend using the tool, because once I use the tool, it helps you line it up and helps you put it in a little bit easier than just kind of freehanding the bracket. What these do on narrow style doors is provides you a mount if you're freshly cutting in a narrow style lock. These go in and then with the bracket, and you tighten these. What these legs do is they stretch out. When you tighten them down, they stretch out and press up against the inside web of the door, and it basically presses against the outside and inside. It basically spreads apart until it's tight, and provides you an area, you know, in case you can't use brackets or something like that. Pretty neat tools. We're going to take my lock off the door. I'm going to show you how those work. But first I do want to go over HES and Adams Rite style brackets as well, just pretty quickly. Basically, HES electric strikes come with these brackets. They have the 1224 or 1024 threaded hole here. They've got a little line showing, and then two 1032 thread here. So I think that's 1224, 1032 thread. Basically, you would put this up on the frame, mark your holes, attach it using that little line. You can't see it because they're screwed on them. You see that little line right there? See how it lines up perfectly? And basically, that gives you an area to attach the electric strike after you cut out the area on either a metal door or an aluminum storefront door. Either one can be used for, and you can use these for, you know, things. You know, I use them a lot for putting in, when you switch into a dead latch from a deadbolt, you can use these to stretch across an open gap. You just rivet them together or just screw them together. They come in handy for quite a bit of different circumstances aside from just putting in electric strikes. So kind of good brackets to have. I'd recommend at least keeping a few of those, especially if you do storefront door work. They come in handy for stretching or spanning areas where you need to go across an open area that had already been cut out. Just good to have. And then you have a number of other ones here just like this. You see those rely obviously on pop rivets as well. Having the slot, you know, there's your area where the lock goes, and then that gives you a little bit more leeway when you're putting it on the door and you pop rivet it in, and having those slots instead of a direct gives you a little bit more leeway in your drilling. So that's just another style of rivet bracket that's out there for mounting electric strikes, regular strikes, deadbolt, anything, any number of things. So that's what those are. So I was going to show you how these work on my actual door. I took it off, and turns out this older door has lips that it just doesn't work for, won't work for. So if I was putting a new lock on this door, I would definitely have to use the LMB 03 bracket instead of the 08, which is one reason why you do need to keep a variety of brackets with you, just in case you run across that situation. These just don't always work in some situations. I've actually been in the field and tried to use it, and it didn't work. So yeah, it's good to have the other brackets just in case. But I hope that answers some of your questions on brackets. Basically, you would put this in, and these press up against the inside of the frame. I've got one here, but I hadn't actually, we were using this for another video. This is actually, you know, a door frame basically, and I hadn't actually cut it out yet, but you see this basically does this. See how, and hey, come back here. So anyway, yeah, if this was cut open, basically it would be pressing up against the outside of it, and then you see how the little legs, they would press up against the inside. So it basically spreads apart when you tighten it down. That tool just helps you align it. There are directions online. I'll put a few pictures of how it attaches. It's just a, you know, kind of a crummy drawing, and I wish I had that cut out already for a lock, but that's a whole nother video that we're going to do one day whenever I get around to it. Anyway, as you can see, it's not always, you know, you can't always rely on this, which is why it's good to have a variety of brackets with you just in case you run across situations like old doors where, you know, it may not fit. Anyway, if you have any questions or comments, hopefully I'll be able to answer them for you. Anything I say, as with any video, to each his own. You may have more of a need for a LMBO 1100,000 or whatever, one of the ones that I said that you don't need. You may be like, Jason, you totally need that. You may be right. I never have. So to each his own. As always, I just hope that that covers some of the situations and some of the brackets that you might need for your daily weirdo locksmithing duties. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great one. We'll catch you next video.